I'm John Fesh, and today we're going to be talking about a couple of good topics for you. We're going to start off by talking about houseplants at the beginning of the season. I think it's a pretty appropriate topic. Scott, you're going to take the lead.
Yes, right now, houseplants are starting to feel the full effect of being indoors. If we brought them in from outdoors from this fall, that they're adapting to the lower light value, and some of those plants are starting to show a little bit of stress. And I just want to talk about a couple different things that we're starting to see in houseplants. I brought this particular peace lily in, and you can see on here that first off, the plant is wilting and that it's showing me that it needs to be watered. But if you start looking at the tips of the leaves over here, you can see that they're starting to turn brown. Some of them have started to flake off. And this is a sign that of a couple different possibilities what could be going on. One of them is that our water comes from the Platte River, so it's high in mineral content. So a lot of times those minerals will start to develop on the root system of the plant. And the best thing that you can do to help remedy that is to stick it in the kitchen sink or the shower, depending on how big the plant is, and just let water run through it for a couple minutes. Maybe a minute to 2 minutes. You don't have to really shower it, but you can help break those salts off of the base of the root system of the plant. Another thing that could be going on is that right now our furnaces have been on for a good 6 weeks, so it's pretty dry inside, and low humidity can cause the tips of a lot of our leaves to start to turn brown. It used to be thought that we could take a squirt bottle and just mist the plant. And that hasn't really proven to do anything except for make the plant dirty. And you leave these awful little water spots. And what you can actually do is go to your favorite hobby store and pick up some basic marbles and put them in a tray. And what we're doing is making a humidity tray. You can use pie pans, anything of that type of nature. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. So what that does is what we're going to be doing is taking this container, this drip tray, and we're going to fill it to almost the very top of it with water, and we're just going to set our plant, let me pop this guy out, this plant, we're going to sit it right on top. And what this does is, as that water evaporates from the bottom of the tray, it just helps improve the humidity around the plant.
And that's pretty important, really, Scott, because you start thinking about where these plants are more native to. It's not eastern Nebraska.
No.
So these are typically central and south Florida plants where it's just naturally more humid most of the year. So we're trying to recreate those kind of conditions.
Right, right. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is these plants are not aquatic plants. We don't want this to be sitting in water. We just want it to be sitting above the pebbles where it's going to be getting and benefiting from that humidity. So you can have a lot of fun with it. You can have take some time, you can decorate it, you can change out the marbles for the different seasons. It just gives you something fun to do. So it's easy to do, inexpensive. Drip trays, pie pans, anything of that nature is really easy to do. I also want to talk about fertilizer. This is the time of the year that we want to start pausing on fertilizing plants because plants are actively growing indoors. So one of our first things that we do when we see a plant that's in distress is we reach for our favorite fertilizer.
That's kind of a natural response. I want to help the plant out a little bit, trying to provide a little TLC for the plant.
Right, and we can actually be doing more damage than good because fertilizers are nutrition. They're not plant food. Right. It's one of the biggest misconceptions that we have to feed the plant, and that's not the case. The plant is growing a photosynthesize and makes its own food. What the fertilizer actually is like vitamins or nutrition to keep the plant healthy. But if your plant is stressed out, we want to be taking a look at what might be going on and not reaching for your favorite fertilizer because you can do more damage than good.
Probably maybe once a month during the growing season when the plants are actively putting on growth, maybe in April, May, June, July.
Right.
And then kind of tapering off, and maybe only one time over the entire winter would you want to fertilize.
Right, because too much of a good thing can actually be bad. So we just really want to pay attention to what our plant is telling us. One thing that I know that I am I do this all the time. I recycle, I reuse my drip trays all the time. But one thing that we don't take in consideration is when we water our plants and then the water evaporates or we drain it, that we get left behind is a tray full of either fertilizer salts, mineral salts. So every time we're watering the plant, those fertilizer salts don't leave this tray. So we can be exposing the plant to more fertilizer or more salts that can actually do some damage. So one of the things that we want to be doing is draining out the trays and cleaning them. It makes it look a little bit more tidy, a little bit cleaner, but we also help reduce the chance of doing any further damage to the plant. And that also goes back to the containers. Terracotta pots are a staple in the garden industry. They're nice, they're inexpensive, they have just a really homey appeal to them. But as you can see from this particular pot, it seems some days on it. And with terracotta pots that we don't always appreciate is that it's porous. So what happens a lot of times is that when the water evaporates out from the pot, that we get mineral deposits on the actual container. So when we have terracotta pots, it's good to get out an old toothbrush that we're never going to use and scrub it off so we can help clean it up. So that way we're not getting any mineral deposits on the container and which can actually do some damage.
Usually you get it, if you go to the dentist, you get a new one every 6 months.
Yeah.
At least my dentist always gives me a new one.
So, I mean, a toothbrush is a great way to help combat a lot of different things. But what a lot of people have started moving towards is inexpensive plastic pots. They're nice looking, but they're not porous, so we don't have to worry about any of those minerals being transported out of the pot that can do some damage to the plant. However, we're starting to see a trend in decorative containers is that they don't come with holes anymore.
Yeah.
People like to call and ask us how much water should we be giving the plants, and we want to give the plant enough water till it comes out the bottom of the pot.
Yeah.
That way we know that the roots are at the bottom of the container. It's not up top. So what we want to do is water till it comes out of the bottom of the pot and then drain off any of that excess water and we can put it back in its spot. So when you're watering till it comes out of the bottom, that is the best thing that you could be doing.
About 10% on average, 10 to 15% of the total volume that you put onto a plant in terms of humidifying it and giving it the water it needs. That's how much should drain out the bottom of the pot. So it's nice to have a slop sink or some kind of utility sink where they can be. I think that's going to allow that to excess water to drain out, because if it's cold and it's winter and here in November, December, January, you want to take it outside.
Yeah. And that does bring up, right now, since the plants are inside, we have them in little decorative containers. With the holiday season upon us, we're buying poinsettias, cyclamens that come in those tin foils that we never take in consideration that tin foil does not allow water to come through.
Right.
So much like this wicker pot that it's in, this peace lily, take the plant out to water it, let the water drain out, and then stick it back in the decorative container. It's just a nice way to make sure that we're keeping our plants healthy because this container here doesn't allow for any type of water to drain out of the bottom. So that's another thing that you want to be doing.
Yeah, you know that decorative foil is almost kind of a given. It's almost a default. And it's kind of just like the internet. It's the best thing and it's the worst thing. It's beautiful and it really helps to tidy up a pot that's otherwise kind of unattractive. I mean, we said it ourselves. This pot wasn't all that attractive. So it covers that up, but it also retains too much water. Sometimes another technique you might want to think about is just getting a pocket knife and stabbing the bottom of the pot a few times just to let that water seep out. And again, if you had a catch tray or you put it in the slop sink, that would work out pretty well. So some way to, some mechanism to get that excess water off.
Right. And we're beginning questions about water. I mean, should we be using distilled water, the room temperature water, all that fun stuff? And the best answer that I have is none of us took a cold shower this morning. We don't want cold tap water to be watering our plants. So take that water, put it in a milk jug, let it come to room temperature, which takes a couple hours.
Yeah.
Then you could go ahead and water, because plants are very similar. Like people, they don't want, excuse me, they don't want cold water. So keep that in mind as you're watering your plants. And it doesn't hurt, because plants are inside, the windows are closed, to stick the plants in the sink or the shower and just wash them off, because plants will get dust on them. So it's a great way to just clean the plant off. It helps wash off any type of insects that could be hiding on the plant, and the plant will be happier in the long run.
Well, and you know, we have low light levels in the winter, probably only 10% of what we had outdoors. A lot of times people have these plants on their patios, and they are great patio planters. But when you bring it indoors, you have a great reduction in light. And so the dust on the leaf can sometimes even just get in the way of light hitting the leaf like it should. You know, here in the studio, we obviously have really nice light, but that can not be the case many times when you're in a regular home. So cleaning the leaf does a great job of, like you said, cleaning off the insects, getting rid of the dust, and just returning the plant to a little bit of health, or at least giving it a fighting chance.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions about your plants, bring in a couple samples to the extension office. We're on 8015 West Center Road, and we'd be more than happy to help you out. We like fresh samples, so stick something in a Ziploc baggie, but don't leave it in the car. Even with the cold, that could do some damage, and we might not be able to tell what's going on.
Sometimes we can't tell whether it's a plant or not.
Yeah.
Some of the samples that come in, so it
little-
is helpful.
Yeah, so we'd be more than happy to help you out, but there's a couple different insects out there like aphids, spider mites, mealybugs, and one of the best defenses is just water. Just sticking them into the sink, hosing them off, and you can dislodge a lot of those insects. And taking that old toothbrush and just brushing those bugs off will really make a big difference.
Well, I think we've covered a variety of things today about houseplants. We know that you need to take the original location where these plants are from into account. We need to think about what is suitable for them. Bright light, humidity, that pebble tray you talked about earlier is a good tip. And if you just do those simple things, a little bit of cleaning, plants will be in pretty good shape, and you'll have success until it's time to maybe return them outdoors again.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for watching this segment here on houseplants indoors. And remember to Go Big Red. Visit us on the Go Big Red website, and you can get more information there. This is Scott, and I'm John, and we're with Nebraska Extension. And welcome to the second segment on this edition of Grow Big Red. I'm John Fesh with Nebraska Extension.
And I'm Scott Evans with Nebraska Extension.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about protecting newly planted trees and shrubs, but also just small ones in general that can get damaged by a variety of forces throughout the winter. Scott, I always think about rodents and critters, not necessarily
Yes.
rodents, but squirrels and rabbits.
Yes, all sorts of four-legged friends that might be out and about. Right now we're getting lots of phone calls about raccoons. So.
Okay. Yeah, anything that is out there looking for a meal to eat. Sometimes we can have our newly planted trees and shrubs, or even bulbs and perennials, be that food, and we really don't want that to happen. So over the years we've accumulated a lot of things that work well for protecting these newly planted, newly installed materials, and some things that maybe don't work all that well. It's probably the one that I grew up with and know the best and have seen around. Scott used to work in a garden center. I'm sure you probably sold this as a product.
We sold a lot of tree wrap,
Yeah.
and it does a great job, but can you tell us a little bit more? What is the purpose of the tree wrap?
Yeah, so let's talk about it. The idea here is that this is going to be kind of an interception, or kind of a go-between, an interface between the tree and the person, or not the person, the critter that's trying to eat it. And for that purpose, this is pretty thin. You know, this is paper thin. It's not going to serve that purpose very well. What it would do would be to reflect some winter sun. And so for that purpose, it probably would be helpful, because sometimes the sun baking on a newly planted tree or shrub can be injurious. So for that purpose, it can work pretty well.
Right, and we don't think about that during the winter. It might be 2 or 12 degrees outside, but that sunlight hitting the surface of the bark of the tree can really rapidly warm it up, and that can cause some damage to the tree.
Yeah, and that can fluctuate. So it could be 20 degrees outside, but on that tree bark itself, it could be above freezing. And then, of course, diurnally, if that's a verb, at nighttime, it's going to drop below freezing. And that happens over and over again, day after day after day. That bark starts to kind of shrink and slough off and bake off. So you want some kind of a wrapping around the tree to reflect that, especially on the thin bark trees. There are so many of the newer maples that are sold, and they all have very thin bark.
Yes, the autumn blaze maple, which is one of America's top-selling tree, great-looking tree, but that bark is really thin. And the green spire linden is another tree that has a really thin bark.
So you're going to need to use something there to protect it, at least for the first few years. So for that protection, it works pretty well. For actual physical protection against something chewing on it, not so good. Another thing that gives you a little bit of pause is that as you wrap this around a tree, let me just pretend here with this. If we're going to wrap this around a tree, you start thinking about pretending this is a tree, obviously. You start thinking about, well, wait a minute, that's a great place for insects to hide over the winter. So our entomology friends tell us, you know, it's a great place for borers and other critters to hide over the winter. So this product is kind of good and not so good depending on what you're going to be using it for.
What time of the year would we recommend putting this around the tree?
So typically would be after you're done mowing the lawn for the summer and for the fall. I would generally say that around Thanksgiving, and so any time now would be a good time to do that. You're trying to reflect that warm winter sun. Something that works a little better would be something like this. Now, if I show this side to the camera, you might recognize this as something you would attach to a downspout or put into a place where you want to drain out some water, maybe a retaining wall or a planter box or something like that. And so this is, I think, just called perforated PVC pipe. You can see small little perforations in it, so it works well for that purpose. But this material, unlike the paper, this material is very, very tough, very hard, and so it makes a much better protector for new trees and shrubs. Now, you think about, well, how am I going to get that around the tree? You need some sort of device like a ripper or a Dremel tool or something like that, and then you just cut it the vertical length of the pipe, and then open it up. Sometimes you might need to do this with a friend.
Yes, yes.
Open it up enough to wrap that around the tree itself. And then it just sort of closes back up easily. Or if you need to use a cable tie or something to kind of tie that back up. That works out pretty well in terms of being a protector. So from physical. Then after that, you want to again use the purpose or the function of the tree wrap and have that winter sun be reflected. So just paint it with some white paint, or I didn't have any white paint, so I had to use kind of this almond colored paint because I couldn't find my white paint. But anything light would work out really well and be much better than the black side, which is actually going to absorb the sun. So something like this is a pretty decent tree wrap, even though it's not originally meant for that purpose, and they're pretty inexpensive.
Right. And it's something that it's easy to do. Something like this, you might need some help with a friend because that plastic is pretty tight. But what you want to do is make sure that you don't put it around the tree and forget about it.
That's true, because trees do grow and trees do get in the way. Some of that tree growth can get in the way. The other thing is, Scott asked earlier, we talked a little bit earlier, when to put that on. And typically we would use the holiday schedule there, put it on at Thanksgiving, take it off at Easter. When the trees start budding and start growing again, we want to get this off. And we certainly don't want to go through the winter with having the benefits and then leaving it on over the summer. Even painted white, it's going to attract a lot of heat. So we want to let that breathe and take it off right around the middle of April or so.
Right. Because that's going to also hold a lot of high humidity. It's going to make a nice microclimate where we can get some fungi or bacteria that could actually do more damage than good to the plant.
On the bark, yeah. So this we would put right down to the ground and maybe even an inch or so into the ground and then have it go up. Typically to the first set of branches, it would be about where you want to keep that. And that's going to keep all sorts of critters and other kind of, even children.
Yes.
Even ne'er-do-well juvenile delinquents would keep them off of it as well. A product that commonly is sold, and again, with your experience from the garden center, would be the folks that live on acreages often have a problem with deer.
Yes, deer can do a lot of damage very quickly to our trees and shrubs. And some of the repellents out there actually just make your hands stink more than they do any good for the plant.
Yeah. This is one of the newer products. We're actually testing this one. Its claims to be season-long control. And from what you and I know about these products is that they're usually effective for about a couple days or maybe up to a week at the most. They sometimes have an odor repellent, sometimes kind of a sticky, oily residue that they leave on a plant. But we're hoping that we do get a little bit more out of this one, but we're not holding our breath by any means. If you did have one plant that was super, super important to you, like it was a memorial plant or something like that, we're not saying don't use it. We're just saying really lower your expectations for its results.
Right. And follow and read the instructions. It will tell you how often that you need to apply it. But keep in mind that if we have a lot of snow cover this winter, some animals like deer or rabbits will ignore that fight or flight response that some of these products will initiate and still feed on the plant because they're not 100% protective.
Another device that you have there is chicken wire. And chicken wire really will serve the same kind of purpose. Now, again, it doesn't exclude everything. This would do a good job for rabbits and squirrels, but not very good for mice. Mice are going to be able to get through the chicken wire. That's why something like this would do a good job for all of them, but it may not be feasible in some locations. Like, it would be hard to put this around a shrub.
Right.
Or a multi-stem shrub. It's going to be hard to do that. For something like that, that would probably work pretty well. You could get it around a multi-stem shrub. Typically, we use those in vegetable gardens in the summertime because it really helps to keep rabbits out. Rabbits, #1 pest in a vegetable garden.
Yes.
And really does a good job of keeping that away. So a lot of this is around protection. Also, another way to look at protection is setting the plant up for the success in the root system. And the first thing we do there is just water the plant thoroughly. Now this year we've been fortunate in that we've had several good rains to hydrate the roots of the plant. But if we do get into a time when it gets a little bit warm and windy and dry, not a bad idea just to go out with a gallon or two of water and put around the newly planted roots to really give them a little drink.
What about if the ground is frozen? Should you still go out there and water?
Well, you might want to do that, but only water lightly, because you could actually be suffocating the plant by cutting off oxygen from the plant. And then, of course, if the ground is frozen, it will eventually have periods of time when it warms up enough to the point where it can accept the water. So paying attention to the meteorologist is always a good idea when it comes to these kind of plants. Once that's in place, then once you've done that, this is a good idea here with the wood chips. The wood chips will do a couple things. First of all, again, they're going to reflect a little bit of heat, but they're also going to hold in moisture on the top of that new root system. Now, we're not talking about thick level of these wood chips, probably just an inch or so, really.
Maybe 2 inches of wood chip mulch. Something that you definitely want to avoid are mulch volcanoes. You might see those around town.
All right, describe a mulch volcano. Let's use this as the tree. You go ahead and describe the mulch volcano.
It's literally where we have 6 to 8 inches of mulch piled up against the trunk of the tree. And we might think it's doing something beneficial, but we can actually kill the tree quicker with those mulch volcanoes.
Well, again, it's this natural tendency to try to do everything you can, kind of that tender loving care kind of thing that people have. I think inside us, to a lesser or greater degree, all of us have this kind of nurturing quality about us, and that's one of the things. It just seems like if I put, if the label or John and Scott's recommendation is to put on 1 inch or 2 of mulch, I'll put on 7 inches of mulch. And really, too much of a good thing there is a problem. Too much of a good thing is a problem. Because really what happens then is it holds in too much water and cuts off any oxygen exchange that might be going on.
Right, and if it's too deep, we can also get some rodents like a vole or a mouse that can actually take up residence inside that mulch.
Great haven for those kind of 4-legged creatures. And then also the size. Sometimes people will just put on mulch that is powder fine and very, very fine. That actually is a bit of a problem too, because it holds in more moisture than we want. You know, just nice 1 to 2 inch size chunks work out really well for that purpose. All right, so protecting plants is a good idea, especially the ones you've just put in. A lot of people do, you know, fall is for planting, so there's a lot of trees and shrubs being planted in the fall. We've talked about protecting them with PVC pipe, with the sisal craft paper. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about the chicken wire. We talked about making sure they go into the winter hydrated, full of water. And then, of course, keeping a little bit of that in there over the winter itself. And then maybe this product that's a little bit dubious.
Yes. But if you have any questions about your winter care of your landscape, please give us a call. You can reach us at 402-444-7804. John or I can help you out. We also have master gardeners that'd be more than happy to answer those questions.
Or you could just stop on by and show us pictures from your iPad or your iPhone. And we do that all the time now. That's kind of the latest trend, is just people showing us all these photos, and that really helps us out figure out exactly what's going on. Well, we sure hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Grow Big Red, and check us out on the internet at that website, as well as check us out at the Extension office. Thanks for watching.